and welcome to the Build Your Own Band podcast, the podcast made for independent artists who want to grow their band in an organic, purposeful, self-determined manner. I am your host, Vince Soliveri, and welcome to the first full episode of Build Your Own Band. I'm really excited to share this first interview with you, but before we get into that, I want to say welcome back to the people who tuned into the first introduction episode, where we talk about the who, what, and why of this podcast. But if you haven't listened to that episode yet and you're just here because you want to listen to this episode and you're interested in the guest, that's totally cool. But if you want to learn more about who I am and what this podcast is, please go listen to the introduction episode. It's on the YouTube page. Whatever podcast platform you're on, it's available. Please take a listen to that if you're interested in learning more about who I am and what this podcast is. I can give you a very brief overview of what that is if you don't have 20 minutes to dedicate to that. But basically, my name is Vince Soliveri, and I am a producer, mixer, and engineer, and I've worked with a ton of bands, and I wanted to create this podcast to help up-and-coming independent bands find their footing in this hazy music industry where everything seems to be flipped on top of its head, and it's really hard to navigate what to do with your band if you're trying to grow it in an organic way. This podcast aims to bring information to people who play in independent bands that come from the source of people with years and years of experience that are sharing their knowledge of their particular niche within the music industry. So today, on this very first episode of the Build Your Own Band podcast, I am interviewing none other than the songwriter, front person, and guitarist of the Dirty Nil, Luke Bentham. If you know anything about me in my work as a producer and a mixer, you know that I've spent a ton of hours with the Dirty Nil in the studio making a lot of music. Most notably, I produced, engineered, and mixed their most recent full-length record, The Lash, which comes out on Dine Alone Records on July 25th this year. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have Luke on as the inaugural guest of the show. For a podcast called Build Your Own Band, I thought it was really fitting to have someone who plays in a band talk about their experience playing in said band. And we talk about it in more detail in the episode, but for those of you who don't know, the Dirty Nil started as a high school band in 2006, and they've built their career into the rock and roll powerhouse that we know them as today. They've had a lot of successes in their career, but they've also overcome a lot of challenges, and we explore a lot of those topics in today's episode. We're going to dive into the episode shortly, but before that, I just want to say, please follow the show on Instagram, Build Your Own Band _podcasts. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube page to keep updated on all future episodes and other content that's going to be coming out, covering a wide range of topics, which I think will be super useful for independent bands to learn from. And there will be resources and additional content and downloads and all that good stuff. So please stay subscribed on all platforms and join my mailing list at vincesoliveri.com/subscribe to get all that information forwarded to your email inbox as soon as it's available. But without further ado, here's our episode with Luke. I have Luke Bentham here today from the Dirty Nil, vocalist and lead guitarist, songwriter, visionary.
Keep it coming.
Yeah. Once again, the reason I have a career is here. We're at the lovely Boxcar Sound Recording Studio in Hamilton, Ontario. Room that I'm very familiar with. I made lots of records here. Made lots of recordings with Luke here. So I thought it was a very fitting setting to have this inaugural episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Vince, and thank you for the warm intro as well.
Absolutely,
it's my honor to be your first guest.
I thought it was very important to have someone like you on this episode because I feel like the Dirty Nil touched all four corners of the map of the music industry and has experienced so much, a lot of ups, couple downs, and navigating all these hurdles along the way. And what people may not know is that this band has existed for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes. 2006, like July is when we first started kind of playing together. Yeah.
What inspired that first jam session with Kyle, which is amazing to think that your creative partnership has lasted that long.
It's amazing.
Like having a guy like Kyle on your side is incredible because I feel like you guys play such different but important roles in keeping the band in existence.
It wouldn't have happened without Kyle. I don't think I'd be playing music without Kyle. I don't think he'd be playing music without me because it's just, you know, when we started the band in the summer of 2006, it was basically an attempt, or it was kind of like, we just started playing the two of us because up until then we had tried to start a band with a bunch of other different people, and we knew a couple more guitar players and bass players and singers, and we would always try and get everybody together. But it really became clear after trying to do this, many times for about 2 years leading up till then, that these people weren't particularly interested in playing music. They were more interested in the idea of it, I would say, right. Or they didn't have the appetite or ambition for it that we did. And by ambition, I just mean making your own music, playing your own music. I think most of the people that we had tried to play music with really liked the idea of that, but the actual kind of mechanics and reality of sitting down and putting some work into it was kind of beyond what most people were willing to commit to. And that makes total sense. I think we come from the generation of school of rock and the classic rock renaissance, and a lot of people were inspired to get themselves an SG or a Squier Strat pack and learn how to play, the couple of riffs and say, I want to start a band, let's do it. And then you start trying, and then it kind of fizzles out. Yeah. Pretty much I think everyone we started playing music with, very few of them are still playing music. But Kyle and I were very serious about it because we really wanted to do it. And I remember walking around our kind of suburban subdivision, basically being like, we have to do this. People might not like it, but we got to do it for us. I remember saying that to Kyle and saying that if we do it, if we work hard at it, so, we will get some people along the way that are into it. But the real kind of catalyst for us actually sitting down was my parents got a Mac, laptop or a desktop computer of some kind in the Christmas of 2005, so like 19 years ago, and it came equipped with GarageBand, and we got an interface, and I started basically putting my first attempt at writing songs, and these songs were all about like 5 minutes long. They all had a zillion verses and bridges, and they were all some big epic thing. And so basically I showed Kyle, I was like, I got some music. Should we play it? And we would just hammer away on the same kind of couple of songs that I had for hours and hours. And we'd play like Sweet Leaf by Black Sabbath, or we played, we'd play like Allman Brothers covers and stuff. And but just the two of us, I wish there was a recording of what that would have sounded like. But basically through that process, I put down GarageBand and started writing songs, just guitar and vocals, so that we could play them. And then, we started writing music together. And I mean, one of the other main catalysts for this whole thing was that so we started doing it in the summer, and then by January 2007, so about 6 months later, we got our friends were having a concert, and they were like, do you want to open your new band? And we're like, yeah, totally. And we're getting closer to this show. And we realized that neither of us is singing. Right. And Kyle's like, well, you have to be the singer. I'm like, I can't do it.
And you're a two-piece.
Yeah, we were a two-piece. Point, right? We had our friend Jordan playing bass with us he was just plugged into the PA system that my mom had rented for us, that we still use, actually. The Nil still uses that original PA system.
Don't build them to last like they used to.
I know it doesn't sound very good, but it certainly has contributed to the sound of the band. It has volume. Yeah, it's a very harsh sounding PA system. But so Kyle was just like, you have to sing, and so then I was terrified of the microphone for like the first few years that we played, and I only kind of gained some confidence with it from failing upwards.
Yeah, but I mean the best always fail upwards. Once you succeed, they don't really succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to just stress that like our ambition when we started was to just simply create and hopefully perform original music. It wasn't to kind of like turn it into a living or tick any boxes other than those. Like that was a supreme accomplishment to us at that time. And still continues to be. Like coming up with some music that we're stoked about is still I think the main source of energy for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing to think that it all kind of feels like a happy accident.
Yeah.
Like so much of what I feel like I want to talk about is like, well, like, coming up with a plan and like, how do you execute your plan? But like, sometimes there is no plan. Sometimes this magic just happens.
Yeah.
And I think something that you're talking about that I think is really important to stress is like finding someone that is just like an extension of you in a way. You share the same brain, you share the same creative vision. And I feel like when you have another person to bounce those ideas off of, like, it doesn't feel like work. It just happens. It's like music always kind of feels like something that like you don't choose. It kind of chooses you. You just have this like itch to scratch. You're just like, I don't know how to get this out. And I feel like when you're alone, you have no context to anything. You have nothing to build like a framework around. But when you have another person like Kyle, who just like gets it, suddenly you're just like, I have an idea, then you have an idea, then I have an idea. You just keep on bouncing these things back and forth. And suddenly, before you know it, you have a real thing, a tangible project or band or song or whatever in front of you. And you're just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Because it's real now. I guess we got to like,
here we are.
We got to continue it. You play your first show, write your first songs. At what point are you like, I want to continue with this versus I just want to play video games?
I think so. When we started gigging around more regularly in like the year after the band started, and we were playing around Hamilton, and to us that was like, whoa, we're playing in Hamilton, because we're from down the road in Dundas, and some
lovely Dundas,
lovely Dundas. Some guy came out and he was just like, hey, you guys are really good. We want to give you a tour of this studio. And we're like, oh my God, we're about to make it. And so this guy brings us to this studio that no longer exists. It was called Mastermind Studios.
I remember that was the first studio I ever walked into.
Yep. Me too. So that was in Burlington, it was on Upper James. And so we went for this tour of the studio and, yada, yada, yada. We get roped into recording our first EP there. And while we're recording, basically like we've got new music coming together. So it's funny because like that album, I think we made about 200 copies of it, which was just like, we're never going to sell all those.
A world where copies exist.
Yeah, exactly. Physical copies of these records. So once we had made this album, like, our new music was clearly like way better, and the songs were shorter, more concise, and our playing was better on them. And so once we kind of had this album and it was out and we were playing, like we did our CD release show, and it seemed like we were off to the races. But then I went to university and Kyle went to university, and we were like doing the band on weekends, and we kind of hit a real stagnant point for a couple years there. And then basically, I'd say when it really kind of started clicking is when, or at least another important milestone for us was when we made Fucking Up Young, and when we put that out, and we started getting attention from the States, and bands were asking us to play with them, and we had quite a bit more buzz than before. And so that was kind of like, I guess, our first real, that was a really important step for us. But, prior to that, we had done this show called Disband. Yeah. We'd filmed an episode. Through that, we got a management offer from a gentleman that shall remain nameless, but he was one of the judges on the show. And one of my parents are both lawyers. And so they took a look at this contract and said, if you sign this, you guys are idiots. I don't know anything about entertainment law, but this is a really bad contract. So long story short, I mean, we were just really we were jaded yet ignorant and unwilling to work with like anybody in the music industry for like several years.
Because of that experience.
Because like we wanted to sign this thing, and then we basically had like a come to Jesus moment where the whole thing was explained to us by an entertainment lawyer. And we were and there was spelling mistakes in this thing, and it was terrible. So I kind of withdrew for a while and had very little stomach or interest in working with people.
Right.
And I think that like another really big check mark or landmark along our musical journey was when I decided like I've had enough with university. And I really want to kind of pursue music. And, I had a wake up call from, a family member who just kind of said like, "Hey, you're turning 23 this year, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, now's your kind of time to, if like if you, I think it's very tempting to just kind of keep saying, well, later, we'll do this later. Like when the things are right. Conditions are never perfect. Conditions are never optimal. You just got to do what you can with what you've got." And so that I'd say like in 2012, 2013, early then is like when I kind of would count like the real proper push of the band really started.
Right.
A lot of kind of messing around, fits and starts, bit like burst of energy and then real kind of quiet before that. But that I'd say like the beginning of 2013 is when we really started like making this 100% no distractions, the priority.
Right.
And
so what was that mindset shift from being so dejected from the music industry and just kind of having this idea of just like, if this terrible contract is what the music industry is, I want no part of it. What was the mindset shift from there to being like, actually, this is worth a second shot. This is worth reprioritizing what I want to do. Like, was there any moment, or is it kind of just school sucks, guitar is fun, maybe let's just give this a second shot? Or was there like a specific moment?
I think for us collectively, like watching some of our peers that we were like friends with, seeing that they, were they were interacting with the industry and good things were happening for them. Mm-hmm. And so it really opened our eyes to be like, we have to do this. I think it's like, you do have to take some risks in life and particularly in the music industry. But I think that our default setting at that point is like, fuck everybody. We'll just keep slugging it out, like we'll book our own tours. And, we pretty quickly realized that strategy was not advancing us as fast as forming partnerships with outside entities that we could work towards the mutual benefit of our interests. That seeing that work for other bands was a real eye opener for us, and really, really changed our mentality about that. Also, just becoming kind of older and like entering our 20s. I think you're forced to do a little bit of more growing up, and you can't really seek refuge in the idea of like, well, one day, when is that day?
Yeah.
Like you start, if you're familiar with your rock and roll lore, you're like, well, by this age, this guy had done this and this person had done that. And you start being like, well, when am I going to do something? So you just kind of start running with the horses, or going with the horses that are running. People get, when there were people coming to our shows that were like, I can help you with this. And we just started saying, yes, okay, let's try that.
Yeah, there's no harm to a certain extent of just giving something a shot.
Yeah.
Just being like, I just want to test the waters here.
Yes.
Kind of see what this is about, and like knowing that you have, a good head on your shoulders and, a partner in all of this that, is on the same track as you, and you both are kind of like the symbiotic being, just being like, we're strong enough to know when it's a good feeling, when it's not. We can sniff out the bullshit.
Yeah.
Such an important factor of just being like, it takes the fear out of the scenario of just like, what if something goes wrong? What if this happens? What if we get perceived this way? You're just like, who cares? Like, let's just try this thing. And if it sucks, we have an out. Let's not back ourselves into a corner, but let's give everything a fair shot.
Yes. And we said no to a lot of opportunities that later on down the road, we were like, well, we probably should have investigated that a little further, but that's how life works. I mean, you don't get a perfect shot at any of this stuff, and you basically, we almost had to like restart the band, I'd say, in 2013, and be like, and really kind of say like, are we going to do this or are we not going to do this? And I've read about similar situations happening with like REM and much bigger bands where they've kind of been doing the band for a long time, but then they have to have like a real serious, like everything on the table discussion about what capacity are we going to pursue this in. And, for us, that involved like, well, we need to, honestly evaluate working with agents and management and a record company. And the only guarantee was that like if we kept doing what we were doing is that we weren't going to get anywhere. We weren't like it was very clear we had done the same thing for a while. And that we needed to make more music. We needed to make friends with some people in the industry that could work with us, and we needed to put a lot more consistent effort into it, and that had a lot to do with me, to be honest with you. Like in terms of I had to do more. Right, I needed to hold myself to a higher standard of work. And 2013 really kind of changed it for us. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that's like a case for not having a backup plan. Yeah. Because when you don't have a backup plan, and, I wouldn't generally recommend that people are just like wild with their choices and just, jump in the deep end of every single life decision ever. But at the same time, there's like, once again, you talk about accountability, like you start having to make choices that are well thought out and are going to benefit you in your future. Because if you make bad decisions in that time span, then your entire life bottoms out. Yeah. And I feel like when you're independent and you don't necessarily have like a boss, or you don't necessarily, especially when a band is starting and, labels don't have as much pull and managers maybe don't have as much influence, you're really in charge of this ship. Yeah. Suddenly like shit gets real. Shit gets real quick. And if you don't have that accountability factor, then every choice you make is for nothing. You know what I mean? And I think it's important to have like, something on your back to be like, this needs to be supported, and how can I do this in a smart, efficient way? And I feel like, once again, a lot of what we're talking about just applies to life in general. Yeah. Of just like, you need to be in charge of everything that you're doing. I feel like you can't rely on anybody but yourself. No one's going to hand you the opportunity. You have to really go for it. And I feel like what you're talking about is exemplary of just being like, something's got to change. What can I do from within to make this positive change and move forward? Yeah. So it sounds like 2013 was the moment that happened for you. It definitely was. And I think like we also, our peers were beginning to go tour in the United States, and we were just like, well, we've done a couple East Coast tours out to Halifax and back. And, there's nothing against that's a great way to start out if you're an Ontario band and you don't have the cash to start financing visas to go to the United States. But, we started, as I said, we were looking around at our friends, and they're going down and they're hopping on these big US tours and all. And we're like, we need to start doing this stuff. So, I mean, that was a big part of it for us. We didn't have a label, we didn't have management. And so we slowly kind of started to, in that year, we started to accumulate, within a year of that, accumulated all those things. Yeah. But I think that the biggest thing that we decided to do overall was basically like, we had to have a sit down and just say like, is this going to be our number one priority? And can we all agree to that? Because if we can't, then we probably should just like either just keep pursuing this in a chill way, but not expect anything good to happen, or stop. And we decided to really beef up our efforts. Yeah. And but I mean, like in terms of having a team to work with is, for us, has been critical. I mean, in the times that we didn't have a team, as you said, it's all on you. Like I used to make the design, like physically I'd make our designs, and we booked all our shows and all that stuff. The keeping track of all that stuff is a big task. Yeah. Even for us at the time when we were just kind of scooting around the Hamilton area and just, DIY rips. It's the only way to actually get at the end of the day too. A lot of even when you do have people that you are relying on or that you're working with to help you, a lot of the impetus is got to still come from the band or the artist or whatever to get up and do things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the almighty Laura Jane Grace from Against Me said, DIY means do it yourself, not do it alone.
Yes.
And I think that is a crucial mindset shift of just like, DIY is community. You know, it's the people that go to the shows, the people that put on the shows, the bands that are playing, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's all about the people that you surround yourself with. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're in your bedroom alone plucking away at your guitar and you just have to do it completely on your own. Like it's important to make connections and rely on other people and kind of, everybody scratches each other's backs in a way to kind of build each other up. It's not competitive.
No.
Maybe a healthy competition and just be like, whoa, that band's sick. I want to do something like that band's doing. And then you figure out a way to do it. But, doing it alone, you're just making it harder for yourself. You know what I mean? There's so many amazing people out there that have different skill sets than you and, even people in your own corner. And I think it's important, like when you're in an independent band, that like people in your band each have different roles. Like if the person in your band loves booking shows, then they should book the shows. And if the other person in your band loves making art, then they should make all the art, like designate these roles to other people in your band and just like lighten the load on yourself because you can't do it alone. It's impossible to do. And sure, some people have, and some people have like made great success out of just like completely doing it alone. But, that's one in a million, At the end of the day, you need people on your side and you need people helping each other to make something grow and make it your own. So I think, you guys coming to that realization seemed like it was a very crucial step in the growth of the band over time.
Yeah. And I think another thing too, that like, once you get from step one, like starting a band and hopefully if you're lucky enough, as fortunate as we have been to like actually be gaining interest and excitement from people in the band, then I think is your second, like very kind of critical point, because once you start getting attention and people start really digging what you're doing, I think that there's a propensity to become too cool and say no to opportunities because you don't, perhaps you are concerned about how your Wikipedia page is going to look when you're done, when you're dead, and or whatever it is. But I can tell you firsthand from doing that and living, making decisions that pertain to our career in that manner for a couple of years. Good things don't happen when you just say no to everything, because you don't, saying, "Oh, I want to be on this label," even though this label won't respond to our emails. But like, I don't want to be on this label because they're not cool. Or listen, you gotta get your head out of your ass. it's
rule number one.
It's just one thing that like I'm only. You can do whatever you want to do, but my advice from my personal experience is that, nobody cares that you didn't come to the party. Nobody notices. Like you've got to, if you want to make things happen in the world of music, you do have to, have a flexible mind, and you have to have a flexible, set of not ethics. Like you should hold those very, very dear and true, but you should be flexible in your approach to your goals. Because if you're extremely rigid and you won't allow, if you'll only proceed in the way that occurs in your mind, you're not going to do anything. It's just not going to happen. You have to respond to opportunities that present themselves that you didn't consider. And so I'd say that's stage 2 after you start the band, and hopefully it gets to the point where people are interested in it. Be very open to whatever opportunities come knocking. And not rigid in what you're willing to accept.
Yeah, and I feel like that's such a crucial point of just like, if you want to get to the next level, like, if you're an independent band that just wants to play your local bar and play covers. Like, music is fun. It should be fun. Like, it doesn't need to become work. But if you want to be the band that gets to the next level, you have to treat it like work at some point, and that comes with a level of responsibility. And I think that also comes with a level of just stepping out of your comfort zone. Yeah. Because you don't know anything beyond what you already know. And the only way to learn more is to put yourself in, maybe some weird, and I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but kind of like a little uncomfortable situation, just to be like, I've never experienced this before. I've never, I'm in a hardcore band and I've only played with hardcore bands, and suddenly this indie rock band asked us to play. That seems weird and out of my comfort zone, but like, give it a shot. There might be a lot of people in that audience that like indie rock and hardcore and just like can grow your band in a way that you never thought possible before. And it's just like, I don't think your reputation is ruined by making a couple like oddball decisions and just seeing how the cards fall, And I think if you're so worried about how you're perceived by others, I think there's a mindset shift that needs to happen there to begin with, because I feel like your focus is not on yourself and your band and your creative process. Your focus is on how other people perceive your band and your creative process. And at that point, what's the point?
Yes. And I think you're very right about that. I think that like how you are perceived is largely out of your control, with notable exceptions, obviously. But I think that we're all like, everybody that gets into rock and roll or whatever kind of music you make, you're probably to some degree romantic about art and music specifically, and you have some kind of like aspiration to live your life in a similar way to some of your heroes or whatever. I think that a lot of the pitfalls that we kind of got into, and other bands of our era got into, our peers at the time were like, well, Fugazi didn't do that, so we can't do that. It's like, well, two things about that. Number one, you weren't in Minor Threat, so you can't do it. Like, so there's that.
Yeah, start a band as good as Minor Threat, then we'll talk.
You're not a lord. And number two is it's not 1986 anymore. Like I think you've gotta, I don't know I can't remember who said this quote, but I think it's a tongue-in-cheek quote. It's a good one, but there may have been I'm paraphrasing, but there may have been times more beautiful than this, but this one is ours. And that is how you have to approach like pursuing a sustainable life in art and music specifically. You have to go with the opportunities and use the tools around you if you want to have a fighting chance of turning it into a sustainable thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an important thing to note too, and this kind of is a gentle segue, is that I think a band needs to find their identity. Like a band needs to find what their North Star is and like their goals, what they want to succeed, but also like what kind of music do you want to make? What is the aesthetic of the band that you want to try and shoot for? What's your dream scenario? Figure that out.
Yeah.
And then work backwards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, it is fun and it's cool and it's interesting to like, just see where it takes you. But you're leaving a lot of the control on the table by just being like, oh, we'll just,
We'll
try these things willy-nilly. Yeah, exactly. But I feel like when you have a vision in mind and you figure like, this is exactly what we want to do, how do we get there? And you work backwards. Suddenly you've created a roadmap for yourself.
Yes.
And it makes that journey a lot easier to just figure out what you need and how to get it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I get it to an extent, at the end of the day, like you might want to just keep your band, and not care about that stuff. But when it comes to breaking through, at the next level, like there's a planning stage that needs to happen and just figuring out like, where are you going?
1,000%.
Because at the end of the day, when you're an independent band, like every good thing that happens to you in the same way that every bad thing that happens also happens to you.
Yeah.
You blow a bunch of money on making a, shitty record or going on a terribly routed tour or this and that, like it's going to take a lot of hard work to make that money back. Like you can't just throw it out there and expect it to come back. So like having some sort of plan and figuring out how to make that happen is so crucial if you want. And once again, it goes back to what you said about sustainability. Like if you want this thing to keep rolling, like you have to figure out how these decisions are best going to serve you and serve what you're trying to do. And I feel like there's so many ways in which you can execute that. And I kind of want to go back to a little bit about talking about recording, because I feel like that is a very crucial part of being in a band.
Yes.
And you referenced Fucking Up Young, and how that song kind of changed things for the band. What's the story behind that song, and what did it feel like while you were making it? And in hindsight, that song's over 10 years old. Why do you think that song and that recording ignited this fire for the band the way that it did?
Well, I think, the song, like the way the song kind of started was I had this riff, no, and we would just jam on this over and over and over again. And I didn't have any more parts, so we would just kind of put it down. And then, we were working on a lot of other songs. It was a very fruitful period for me creatively. Like I was still up at university, but I was coming home every weekend with songs. Like I was really productive, really energized about the band, and I was bringing the goods. That was just a riff that I made up while we were practicing, and we just thought it was funny, and we were just jamming on it. But we didn't have anywhere to take it. And then I actually had a friend who had a serious drinking problem, and he was clearly, going down an extremely perilous path that was very predictable what was going to happen. And one night he ended up in a bush, and the police found him, and he was in the hospital. And I went and saw him, and he was completely unrepentant, and he was completely unwilling to absorb any kind of message of concern from us. And so I just kind of left with this crazy feeling. And I remember going home, and I picked up my Les Paul, and I just I made the chorus to the song up in my bedroom. And it wasn't I have an next part to that thing we were jamming on. Like I just did that chorus, and I tacked it on to the riff that we had, and it was instantaneous. The only other thing I remember was we played it through a few times, and I said, Kyle, love it. Can you do halftime on the chorus though? And then it was such a
fell into place.
Yeah, it was such a sledgehammer chorus that it was very clear it's a banger. And so in terms of the recording, Dave had a great idea on the bridge when it goes ba 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 ba. He added those hits in there before I had it as just wow no 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 no. He added those kind of really cool hits, but and then Kyle had that sick ass drum beat. But we basically, the recording of it was this drawn out we did it up at my godfather's cottage. We recorded it up there. We recorded the vocals in my parents' basement. And then we mixed it in town. But, I'm going to say something that I don't know, and not to discredit anybody that took part in the recording of that song, because it's got a charm to it. It sounds pretty cool. But I do, and not at the risk of sounding a bit arrogant on the band's behalf, but I do believe that you could record that song with a boombox and it would still kick ass.
Yeah.
Because it's a banger.
Yeah.
The
fundamentals of a great song exist.
I think it rocks,
regardless of production.
I think it rocks pretty hard. If you listen to I think it didn't really. I don't think the connection of that song with an audience, and it's continued. People still seem to enjoy it. I don't think that's really based around the production of it. I think it's based around just the core elements of the song. And part of my feelings about that are also rooted in how drawn out the mixing and mastering and certain other aspects of the post-recording aspect of getting that song together were not the most pleasant at times. But that song, I think, like it was clearly the best song in the crop of songs that we had amassed at that time. But I think that it really helped because it was something that people connected with, and it killed live. And but I think we just had no money at the time, and we did it really cheap with our friends, and I don't think we couldn't have planned on coming up with that. But I think that the thing, what I've learned about particularly like productivity when it comes to music, and I think it's probably the same for anything, is you're not going to come up with anything, or I don't come up with anything if I'm like, well, I'm only going to write when I feel inspired. I have to go, I sit there every day and I work on music.
Yeah. Just see what comes out.
And I like, sometimes I'm like banging around on some old idea, or I'm learning an old cover or something, but I go and I sit and play guitar at home, but I go to our practice space and I play guitar for at least a couple hours every day, just like nice and loud with no one listening, and just like, and I mess around with it. We practice regularly, because when you don't do those things, somebody explained it to me this way, or they pitched it to me this way, and I think it's a good way of looking at it. You're just missing out on the songs and the moments that you could have had if you. Now, I also do, with the caveat, I should add that sometimes when you're working really intensely as a band, particularly touring and that stuff, there is a time to down tools and let everybody kind of decompress and get to their lives for a second. But when you're home, if you're just at home and you're getting things going, it's probably a good idea to work very consistently.
Yeah.
But sorry, back to the recording of Fucking Up Young.
Well, I 100% agree with everything that you're saying, and I do think that consistency is key. And once again, goes back to like finding people in your band that everybody's on the same page. Because I fully admit I've fumbled every single band I've ever been in because I don't care about playing music all that much. You know what I mean? I love like playing music and I love hanging out with my friends, but I don't necessarily love playing shows. I don't necessarily love band practice. Like I love being in the studio. Like that's where I thrive and stuff like that. And I feel like, in my recent retirement of playing live music, I've seen all the bands that I used to be in still thriving without me, because they suddenly found people that were more in line with their goals of just wanting to like play and make music and jam and do all of these, crucial parts of being a consistent band. And I think when you find those groups of people and when everybody's really aligned, is really when magic happens, and you can really just go to town and just do everything you possibly can. Because I feel like the only way you can get better at something is simply by doing it. And it goes back to what you were saying of just like, if you're just waiting for all the stars to align, for everything to be perfect for you to execute something, you're only going to miss opportunities. You're never gonna do anything. You're never going to achieve anything. Sometimes you just need to do it and make those mistakes along the way. And when you have a group of people that you're playing with and collaborating with that are all on board, like all the greatest bands exist because of that collaboration between people, and a lot of bands have their one leader and the people who kind of follow their direction. But at the end of the day, it's just like, all these minds syncing up for one common goal is like, aside from every other factor, that is like the one constant between every band that like is kicking ass.
Critical.
I mean,
but
yeah, going back to Fucking Up Young, did you play that song live before you recorded it, or did people hear that song in its recorded version before you ever brought it to a live audience?
We played it live a bunch before so we started playing the song live. I remember like it just being such a clearly different song in our repertoire, like because we were practicing in my parents' basement, and we'd finished practicing and we like went upstairs, And then I just remember turning to everybody. He's like, "Do you guys want to go play that song again?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's go play that song again." Like, so it was, I don't know. Clearly, there's some songs that like once in a while, like sometimes I can bring in what I think is like, this is one of the best songs I've ever written.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's great, but it's not like lightning in a bottle. Like you can't plan on having lightning in a bottle. Like there's times where I've tried to like create the conditions where like, we'll just show up and then nothing happens. Like, no, you just like, it's those moments of like, whoa, we fucking did something only happen when you're working hard on other stuff. And but I mean, I like when we would play it live, we probably played it live 10 times or so before we recorded it. And every time we played it, people would be like, what's that song?
Right. So was that kind of like the inspiration of to be like, well, if we're going to record a song, let's do this one because clearly people like it? Or did you record it with a larger batch of songs?
We did it. It was one of 8 songs that we did at the time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. With special attention on that one for sure. But we tried to nail it all 8, but we had a great time recording that up north. But it was just, like before we even played it live, it was like the early feedback that we got from it, like only confirmed what at least I felt about it, that the song kicks ass.
Right. So the song happens in the room live to a bunch of people. That gives you the affirmation of like, this song rocks. We should do something with it. You go to record it. The version that we hear to this day exists.
Yeah.
Do you think that music video had a large influence on how that song spread? Because I
think so.
I feel like that music video is like a very iconic, especially like, as a Hamilton adjacent band. I know you're not a Hamilton band, you're a Dundas band, it's very clear. But as a Hamilton adjacent
you've made that
band,
very clear.
Yeah. And respect, honestly, Thirsty Cactus is a great place. I feel like, when that music video dropped, it like people who had maybe never seen the band before or had maybe heard the band and didn't really like have any connection to the band, that video popped up and suddenly it was just like, holy shit, I got to see this band. And I think it was a combination of how like raw and intense that recording sounds. It really does sound like, you record it in a garage. Like it has that incredibly sincere DIY vibe to it, which I think was very helpful. And then you couple that with just like this house party music video. Mm-hmm. I feel like it was hard to ignore the band at that point, because if you wanted to experience loud rock music in a party atmosphere and you watch this video and you hear this intense song, suddenly you're just like, well, this is the band that I got to go see. Like, I have no choice. Like, this band looks so sick. Like, unless you're like, you hate rock music or you have a stick up your butt, like, it's hard to deny when you watch that music video that you're like, I got to pay attention to this band. At least that's how I feel about it. And I'm curious if you feel like that combination of the song in the video helped propel that song into kind of like the stratosphere.
I think so too. I mean, I think it's an excellent propaganda reel for the, and we were just like, drinking beers and having a great time at that house party.
That's the best thing about the video is it feels so sincere. It feels like that would have happened if cameras weren't there. I think that's great.
One of the funniest things that happened while we were making that video, there's a bunch of guys that like have their shirts off in it. And I remember turning to the guy that was making it, Dave Dunham. Shout out Dave Dunham.
Shout out Dave.
He approached us. He's like, I want to make you a video. And I was like, how's it looking, Dave? And he just turned to me and he's just like, a lot of dudes.
By design, Dave.
Still remember. I just remember cackling, laughing.
That's so funny.
But,
was that video just like you loaded some cameras into a house, got your bunch of buddies in there, and just being like, let's play the song a few times and see what we capture?
Yeah, and we shot we had just met single mothers that day, and they came to the video shoot too. But I think we shot some other scenes we shot most of that video in like the early summer, late spring of 2012. We had shot other footage for it in like the fall of 2011 because I had a broken wrist and I'm in cast for like parts of the video.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was our first music video. And I was just like, let's just see what happens. But yeah, I mean, it was clearly that was when we first, and that video was the first thing that we did with a publicist, Adam Bentley over at O2 Research, who we still work with.
Shout out Adam.
Shout out Adam. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty integral to kind of planting our flag and getting things going. And then basically from there, you know, we were, in terms of like the recording of all that stuff, we were pretty content it took us a long time to kind of like really find our groove with recording and getting decent at recording. It's a skill that we didn't ever work on. And I think it's one of those skills that is kind of hard to work on until you're actually doing it, and you kind of have to gain some experience. But, you know, I had some serious problems like singing well in the studio or not like blowing out my voice and things like that. Getting guitar tones that I could live with was not a skill of mine, particularly in the early years. Kyle had his own issues with recording drums, and you know, it wasn't really until we were kind of like in our mid-20s or so that like we actually got pretty confident in the studio and able to execute things properly. A lot later than other bands of our kind of generation.
Yeah, well, the studio is interesting, and obviously I have a lot of experience working with a lot of different bands in this very room, actually.
Indeed.
And the conversation that I end up having with a lot of bands is just like, recording is hard, and it's hard for a multitude of reasons, but I think why it's mainly difficult, especially if you haven't had a lot of experience with it, is that you almost never hear yourself like under that much scrutiny. Like, in what other scenario as a band, aside from recording, do you hear your guitar with a mic in front of it coming out speakers like immediately? You know, it's always shooting into a room, whether it's just, you know, you're amping your jam space or at a venue, it's going through the PA. Like, you never hear it that microscopically ever. And then you're doing that to every single instrument in your band, and sometimes multiple mics on an instrument like drums, and like you've never heard your music that way, and suddenly the entire sound of your band changes because the entire environment around you changes. So it only makes sense that bands kind of suck at recording when they start, because unless you're at home demoing yourself, which I highly encourage every band to get GarageBand or get Reaper or whatever and just start trying to demo stuff yourself, because you will learn so much about who you are as a player, and you will learn so much about your songs. You'll skip so many steps if you just try and demo things yourself. But yeah, you never have that experience until you walk into the studio, and it's so difficult because you don't get a free studio experience very often. And often when you do get a free studio experience, there's a seedy reason why.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, especially in the music industry, kids.
Yes, exactly. So it's just like you walk into the studio and suddenly you're like learning on the spot, and you're paying like good money to learn how to do this. And it's so difficult. And like simply playing to a click. Like, if you've never played to a click and you walk into the studio, you're like, I'll try this song to a click. I'm just like, don't even waste your time. Because it's a completely different beast of how to play your instrument. And it's fine to suck at it, but it's also important to try and change that.
Yeah.
Or record in a studio that embraces chaos if you're not the type of band that likes to record to a click or whatnot. So like, it does make sense that you guys sucked at first, and just through trial and error figured out the way of like, how do we make the best recording possible? And I'm kind of curious, at what point in the band's career did you feel like the confidence level of making a record was like at an all-time high?
Master Volume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it about that? I love that record, by the way. I think a lot of people love that record. And I think that, in my perception of the band as a fan, it feels like that was the next level of just like, holy shit, the Nil is like the band now. And I think that record was crucial in that. and I heard it because I loved Higher Power so much. I remember showing people that record and just being like, you got to listen to this. This band is like killer. The songs are great. And this production is like, it will melt your face off. And then I heard Master Volume and it felt like just a far better reined in version of what that was. And it felt like that was what the band was meant to be all along. And I'm curious why you think that record just like unearths this new level of proficiency in the band.
I think there's a variety of reasons. I think that like we dispel, like we left at the door a lot of the kind of like really I think we like if I'm being real with you, we got our asses kicked making Higher Power.
Right.
From every single instrument, drums, bass, guitar, vocals, every single thing was like fucking a nightmare. Like once we actually got it under the microscope for a variety of reasons, but I think I don't think any of the other people involved on the playing side of the record would disagree that the most of the onus of that had to do with like the three people like playing the music,
right?
Was primarily the reason why that was. I mean, I was a wildly we were used to playing this really fast music. We had kind of gone into a much faster direction, less kind of big choruses, just more really fast, really loud. And so my singing style, my vocals were so painful to record, like, because I had no idea like how my voice actually sounded on these songs. We hadn't demoed any of these songs. We didn't know how they sounded. Like,
you only heard your voice through that PA.
Yeah, or like a lot of the shows we were playing at that time didn't even have monitors. Like we were just playing shows like in houses, and so that was a big thing. Like we had insisted on, we were like, we're only using our gear, and it has to just. So that led to
that rigidity,
that kind of like dogmatic mentality. Like it was like, okay, well, this is how it sounds under the microphones. And we're like, fine. Like it sounded like not very good.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, like, we were used to playing, like we hadn't, put it this way, like in terms of like tempos and things on Kyle's end, like we hadn't like speed clocked any of these songs. We had no idea how friggin' fast we were playing them all. And like that, like when there was parts that should have been halftime, we weren't playing at halftime. We were playing at like 2/3 time.
Right.
Like just really, and like consistency thing. Like the biggest thing was just consistency. None of us had any consistency to our playing.
Yeah.
Because we hadn't done that yet. Like we had made like that Smite EP right before then, a couple of years before then. And that went pretty smooth, but that was kind of a different style. That was that really fast style of music. And we only had a bit of time, but, and so we just kind of banged it out and we had a great time making it and we were proud of it. But Higher Power, I think we were like, this is our first LP. And like, we didn't do the necessary work to like actually get, the amount of tight and consistent, and like, not just like playing together, but like our individual work.
Right.
Where it's like, and because we hadn't learned the lesson yet. Higher Power was the lesson of like,
and an expensive lesson.
An expensive lesson,
a tough
yes.
lesson to learn.
But a lesson of just like, what does it sound like when I just play by myself? Because that's what I'm going to have to do.
Yeah.
And so there were, that record really left a scar in my mind, a chip on my shoulder about just like never again. Like the next record we make has to be much better in terms of like, I love Higher Power. Like, I'm making it sound like it's the worst thing. Like I went back and listened to it a couple of years ago. It rocks. Yeah. It's awesome. But but just, you weren't there. You weren't there. If you were there, like going through the realization of like thinking it's going to sound like, name a massive sounding rock record, but it actually ended up sounding like Higher Power, which I love.
Yeah.
But
it has its charm and that got me listening to
there you go. And I think a lot of the songs are pretty solid. And so it just like, it wasn't like a get in there, bang it out type thing. It was like we did like 2 weeks in the studio, then we did like 3 or 4 weeks of vocals, and it got mixed over months. And so like the length of the process of that record really affected, I think, all of our enjoyment of that record. And so by the time we got to Master Volume, we had, an extremely seasoned producer and engineer in John Goodmanson, but also just like
shout out
John, but also we demoed a lot leading up to it to be like, where are the bottlenecks in these arrangements? What do these songs actually sound like when you're not playing them, when you're just listening to them? And being like, yo, this is too long, that's too short, this is too fast, like really kind of like getting granular on a lot of things. And John was the one who had to be like, yo, we need to pull this back a bit and you guys need to be a bit looser, because we had so gone, I kind of really just cracked the whip on like trying to make this thing as airtight as possible, and John injected some swagger, like
some life back into it.
Yeah, and like we also just had fun being like, okay, well, we'll do this song to a click, but we won't do that song to a click, because that was another thing when we did Higher Power. We were trying to. They noticed that our tempos were really kind of off, and so we tried to record to a click, and we couldn't keep on a click as a unit.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing. It was just like next time we record, we gotta be better at this. Like this is embarrassing.
Yeah.
So
I also feel like it's important to like recognize your shortcomings before correcting them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because having a higher standard for where you are is crucial, because that complacency doesn't exist, and suddenly you're striving for something. There's a goal to be met, and then once again, like finding what that goal is and trying to work backwards from it is crucial. And from you guys being a sloppy band in the studio, you're like, okay, how do we get tighter? Metronomes are a great place to start, you know what I mean? So it's like having this like kind of like critical thinking involved in it, of just being like, something's off, and trying to find out what it is that's off, and how to course correct from there. And it sounds like you guys kind of learned that the hard way.
We did. And I really had it as like, it was severely disappointing to hear that like all these songs that I had written and like worked really hard on, and like, that we had jammed a lot, and then we like listened to the final product. It's like, and so that really, like, nothing teaches you better than, I don't want to call it failure. It's obviously not a failure. Like we made the record, it came out, it won a fucking Juno. Fuck you.
Which one of you suckers would say you did that?
Yeah. Huh? But in terms of like of being like, why can't we make a record that sounds like big, like really big? Yeah. Like,
how did the Black Album happen?
Yeah.
How do we figure that out?
How do we make something that sounds much? And so it's just like we had to be honest about why things went wrong, like why things went the way they went. And a lot of it had to do not with like our work together. It had to do with like individual work, where it was just like, there's been many times in this band where we've been didn't realize how complacent we were being until we just had like some rude awakening and be like, yo, we need to do more of the less sexy like work that is integral to making sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
But one thing that I think we've always prided ourselves upon is that like when we do get that cold splash of water, we do snap into action and correct, like, or put the necessary effort into the necessary area to make sure that we don't feel like that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys are smart in the sense of just like, you're not risking it. You've built the band up to a point in which it's just like it can't fall. You know what I mean? Like this is, at this point, it's all your livelihood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just like, you gotta act quick. You gotta snap into gear and just like figure out what it is. And it feels like the band is at a spot in which it feels like the band more than ever is firing on all cylinders, and the creative control despite the fact that you have an amazing team of great people, I'm very, very proud to be on that team. It is, once again, the reason I have a career. It truly feels like the band has full control of what is happening. You know what I mean? It's not like someone else is making these decisions for you and you're just like, well, shit.
I guess we got to
do it. You know what I mean? And I know we don't necessarily have to get into it. I know the band has been in scenarios like that before.
For sure.
And now it just really feels like you guys just do whatever you want to do. And I'm just curiously, as we wrap this up, like, what do you think are like, if you can narrow it down to like 2 or 3 things of like, what are the most important things that you've learned along the way that have led you to this point to have your destiny in your hands and you feel secure and confident about it and it continues to shape up the way that you want it to? What are the things that you think led you to this point?
That's a really good, it's
another hour of the podcast.
Yes,
Great.
well,
I locked us in.
I'll try and boil it down as quickly as I can. But number one is, as cheesy it is like we've never given up on anything. We've never been like, well, everybody's sick. We all feel terrible. So let's leave this tour. Yeah. Because I can't sing and he can't do this. And like, you just need to, or when really bad things are happening and we don't, if there's any way of continuing and just like, trying to figure out how to make it work, we always do that. That's it. We know a lot of people that didn't, a lot of people are like, oh, this isn't really matching the vibe that I wanted to have. So we're turning around. We're canceling the tour. Don't do that.
Yeah.
If you say you're going to do something, if people have bought tickets, do not cancel.
Yeah.
That's integral. Follow through is really critical because, as we've already discussed and can't stress enough, conditions are never optimal. No. You just have to do what you can when you're there. So that's number one. Number two is that I don't know, just for Kyle and I personally, we always keep it as, our businesses or our band is really business or busy these days in terms of we do there's a lot of emailing and a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of this kind of coordination. And so it's really easy to kind of have the thing just kind of become a bit mechanical and really, a bit stagnant in certain ways. There's a kind of a tempting slide into that. And so Kyle and I will meet up and we'll just play covers and just have a good time. Just to have fun.
Yeah, just to remind yourself of why you're playing.
This is fun. Yeah. We can do, we don't have to just I don't have to go down into the jam space every day and be like, well, we better come out with something. We've gone down extreme lengths of that mentality in the past and it doesn't get you anywhere good. If you push too hard on that stuff, you have to keep it being fun.
Yeah.
Is I think really, really important. And you need to just find ways, even when you're not having fun, of tricking your brain and those around you into thinking you are having fun. The distraction is integral.
Yeah.
But number 3 is honestly, I think the most important one is that you started this program by discussing it. You are your community, and you need to make friends. You need to support your friends. This is not a zero sum. This isn't Coke versus Pepsi. This is people, every person that you can mobilize out, new person, and get into your band, another band that's your friend's band or artist, this person can potentially become a fan of that person too.
Absolutely.
You're mobilizing new fans that will enjoy everybody's art. Yeah. So being a part of a community and making sure that you go to shows and that you support your friends' art is just as integral as working on your own art.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to end it. And I want to thank you so much for chatting with me. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
I feel like we can probably chat for another 6 hours and it might be a good idea to do this again, in a year when you're done your infinite tour.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a pleasure. And God, there's so much that I wish we could still talk about. But thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Well, the pleasure's all mine, Vince. And until the next one.
And there you have it. That wraps up the first full episode of Build Your Own Band. I hope you found that episode to be insightful and educational and entertaining. We touched on a lot of topics that I believe to be very helpful for people who play in independent bands and maybe aren't sure what their next step is. But one thing we talked about that I think is important to address is this concept of doing it yourself. Clearly, no matter what level your band is on, doing things on your own with your creative vision at the forefront is super important into building your band in the way that you want it to go, not in the way that other people think you should go. I've said this before and I'll say it again. There isn't a way to build your band in an organic way that is quick and easy. This podcast is about doing it the low and slow way, which is the way that I believe is the most sustainable way, the most creatively fulfilling way, and honestly, the most enjoyable way. So I can't thank Luke enough for being part of this first episode, and I can't thank the Dirty Nil enough for their support. Please do check out their latest single, Fail in Time, which just came out the other day, and definitely pick up their album, The Lash, which comes out on July 25th of this year, 2025, on Dine Alone Records. Once again, produced, engineered, and mixed by me. I can't stress enough, please follow the show on Instagram at buildyourownband_podcast. Follow us on Spotify, follow us on Apple Podcasts, follow us wherever you get podcasts, and subscribe to the YouTube page if you would like to watch it. And if you did none of those things, if you could do one thing and just subscribe to my mailing list at vincesoliveri.com/subscribe. That's going to be the most direct link to all the content that I'm going to be putting out in the future. Beyond the podcast, there's going to be other content that I'm going to be putting out that's going to be relevant to independent bands everywhere. If you're into demoing and songwriting and learning more about ways to make the most impact with your band, that's the place to be. So once again, vincesoliveri.com/subscribe. I appreciate you listening or watching or however you're consuming this podcast. And we got another episode in the chamber that will be announced very soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that one and see you on the next one.